Every time I had dinner at my boyfriend's parents' house, I blacked out before dessert, every single time. The first time it happened, I chalked it up to exhaustion. I was working back-to-back 12-hour days on a complex wire fraud case, and I had barely eaten before my boyfriend picked me up that Friday evening. His mother had made her signature braised short ribs, and I remember thinking the sauce tasted slightly bitter, just for a second, before I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Then the edges of my vision softened. Then everything went dark. I woke up on their living room sofa with a wool throw blanket draped over me that definitely had not been there before. The ceiling fan was spinning slow and lazy above me. My mouth felt like I'd swallowed a handful of chalk. When I sat up, the first thing I noticed was my blazer. I had folded it neatly over my lap when I sat down at the dinner table. Now it was draped across the armchair across the room, several feet away from where I was lying. I didn't think too much about it that night. I was embarrassed, honestly. My boyfriend drove me home, rubbing my knee the whole way, telling me I needed to slow down, that I was running myself into the ground. His mother had hugged me at the door and said in that warm, practiced voice of hers that I should take better care of myself. She even sent me home with a container of leftover ribs. The second time it happened was 3 weeks later. I woke up that time to find my work phone sitting on the coffee table in front of me with the screen still glowing. A notification I didn't recognize, something about a failed authentication attempt. I picked it up and stared at it, my brain still foggy and slow. The phone was a government-issued device, encrypted, tied to my credentials at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I was a special agent. The phone required facial recognition and a 6-digit PIN to unlock. I had not touched it since I slipped it into my blazer pocket when we arrived. I looked around the room. My boyfriend was in the kitchen. I could hear him. His parents were nowhere in sight. I stared at that failed authentication screen for a long time. That night, instead of letting him drive me home, I told him I felt fine and I drove myself. The moment I pulled out of his parents' neighborhood, one of those gated communities in South Charlotte where every lawn looks like it belongs on a magazine cover, I drove straight to urgent care. I told the nurse I believed I had been given something without my knowledge. I asked for a full tox panel. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded and didn't ask unnecessary questions. The results came back 48 hours later: lorazepam, a benzodiazepine, enough to knock someone out cold for 2 to 3 hours without leaving them with much memory of the transition. It doesn't taste like anything if it's dissolved into food or a rich sauce. I sat in my car in the urgent care parking lot and read the lab results on my phone 3 times. Then I called my best friend and told her everything. She told me to go to the police. I told her I needed to think. Because here's the thing about being an IRS criminal investigation special agent: you don't move until you have the kind of evidence that cannot be explained away, argued around, or thrown out on a technicality. I had spent 6 years building cases against people who had teams of expensive lawyers specifically hired to find the cracks in my work. I wasn't going to hand this to a local detective and hope for the best. I was going to build this the right way. I did not tell my boyfriend what the lab results said. What I did instead was spend a Saturday afternoon at a specialty surveillance shop I'd used once before for a personal security situation. I found what I was looking for in about 20 minutes: a compact recording device small enough to fit inside the barrel of a pen, with a clip designed to hook onto a jacket lapel. It recorded HD audio and video in a 180-degree arc, 12 hours of battery life. Automatic upload to a private encrypted cloud server the moment it connected to any Wi-Fi network. I practiced clipping it to 3 different jackets before I found the angle I wanted. The following Friday, my boyfriend's mother called to invite us to a casual dinner. She said she was making her crawfish étouffée and that she'd been saving the recipe specifically for me, knowing how much I loved Cajun food. I said I would love to come. When we arrived, I clipped the pen to my blazer lapel before I even got out of the car. His father greeted us at the door with his usual handshake that went on about 4 seconds too long. The kind of grip designed to remind you who's in charge of the room. He ran a commercial real estate development company that had put up half the office parks in Mecklenburg County over the last 2 decades. On paper, he was worth somewhere north of $12 million. On paper. His mother came out of the kitchen in a silk blouse and pressed slacks, smelling like expensive perfume and standing in heels even though it was a Friday night at home. She kissed my cheek and guided me to the kitchen island with her hand firmly on my elbow, the way you guide someone you're controlling while pretending to welcome them. My boyfriend's sister was there too, perched on a bar stool with a glass of white wine. Her husband, whom I'll call my brother-in-law, stood near the window with his phone in one hand and a bourbon in the other. He nodded at me when I walked in, that was all. He was always quiet around me in a way that felt less like shyness and more like calculation. My future mother-in-law insisted on serving me personally. She ladled the étouffée into my bowl herself, holding the ladle out with both hands, smiling at me while I took the first bite. The whole family watched. I noticed that. Nobody else got served that way. The étouffée was delicious, I'll give her that. 20 minutes later, I felt the familiar softening at the edges of my vision, the heaviness dropping into my limbs like wet concrete filling my bones. But this time, I was ready. I had not actually swallowed most of what I'd eaten. I'd been moving the food around my bowl, lifting small amounts to my mouth and letting it fall back while my napkin stayed close. It was the sweet tea I was worried about. My future mother-in-law had poured mine from a separate pitcher, different from the one she used for everyone else. I had managed to pour most of it into a small travel container tucked inside my blazer pocket when no one was looking. What I kept, I barely touched. But I had eaten enough of the étouffée that some of the drug was in my system, not enough to knock me out, enough to make my hands feel slightly distant, my thoughts a little slower, enough to make the performance believable. I let my chin drop toward my chest. I let out a long, slow breath and let my body go loose against the back of the dining chair. "She's going under again," my brother-in-law said. His voice was flat, almost bored. Nobody seemed surprised. My boyfriend was at my side in an instant, his arm around my shoulders, guiding me up from the chair. I let myself go limp, just enough weight that he had to work to hold me. He steered me out of the dining room and into the living room, laying me down on the same sofa where I'd woken up the last 2 times. I kept my breathing slow and even. I kept my eyes shut. For a long moment, there was nothing but muffled conversation from the dining room, the clink of silverware, the hum of the air conditioning. Then I heard my boyfriend's footsteps go back toward the kitchen. And the living room went quiet in a different way, the kind of quiet that has weight to it. Heels on hardwood, then my brother-in-law's heavier footsteps, then my future sister-in-law's voice, low and tight. "Did you bring it?" "Right here, my brother-in-law." I heard the soft thud of something being set on the glass coffee table. "She always goes under fast." My future mother-in-law, cool and precise. "We don't have much time before he comes back. Get her phone first." I felt someone reach into my blazer pocket. Careful, deliberate fingers. They pulled out my government phone, and I heard the faint sound of it being held up, positioned close to my face. "It needs the face scan," my brother-in-law said. "Tilt her head up." Hands on my face, not rough but not gentle either, adjusting the angle of my jaw upward like I was a prop. I stayed completely still, my breathing did not change. "Concentration failed," he muttered. "Her eyes need to be open, the system's reading that she's not conscious." "Try again." My future mother-in-law's voice did not waver. 3 more attempts, 3 more failures. The government phone has bioptic detection. It reads pupil response, not just a static image. I had read the technical specification myself when the device was issued to me. A sleeping face won't unlock it, not even close. "It's not going to work," my brother-in-law said finally. "The laptop is the same way. We need her awake and cooperative, or we use the other angle." A pause. Then my future mother-in-law spoke again. "Then we use the photos." I heard my future sister-in-law pull out her phone. I heard the shutter sound disabled, the quiet click of it being switched off, and then the sofa cushion dipped as my brother-in-law settled in beside me. What happened next took about 4 minutes. I know because I counted the seconds in my head one by one to keep myself from reacting. He pressed himself against my side, his hand moved to my hip. I heard my future sister-in-law circling, the soft sound of her shifting position, the quiet digital click of her camera. My future mother-in-law directed the whole thing the way you'd direct a photo shoot. Lower, turn her head, move your arm. I stayed still and I let the pen on my lapel do its job. By the time my boyfriend's footsteps came back down the hallway, they had scattered. My brother-in-law back to his spot by the window, my future sister-in-law on the love seat with her phone face down in her lap, my future mother-in-law standing in the doorway with a glass of water she pressed into my boyfriend's hands as he walked past her. "She's still out, poor thing, she just needs rest." I waited another 10 minutes before I let myself wake up. The groggy routine, the slow blink, the hand to the forehead, the confused look around the room. My boyfriend was right there, crouched beside the sofa, his hand on my arm. I told him I wanted to go home. He drove me. He held my hand the whole way. He kissed my forehead when he walked me to my door and said he'd call in the morning to check on me. He looked at me with eyes full of something I had mistaken for love for almost 2 years. When his car was out of the parking lot, I went straight to my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into the encrypted cloud server. The pen had been uploading the entire time. I pulled the audio file, put on my headphones, and listened to every second of what had been recorded in that living room. And then I understood all of it. My future father-in-law's company had been inflating construction costs on commercial development projects for 11 years. Fake invoices from shell contractors, cash payments off the books. He had underpaid his federal taxes by an amount I estimated, running rough numbers in my head, at somewhere between $4 and $6 million. The pending IRS audit, flagged by my division's automated detection system 3 months ago, was about to find all of it. My brother-in-law had discovered the fraud through his wife. He hadn't reported it. He'd offered to help hide it instead, in exchange for a share of the offshore accounts the family had been quietly building. And when my boyfriend started dating a criminal investigation special agent, when they realized I had access to the IRS examination database, that I could theoretically view the status of any pending audit, that my credentials were tied to a federal system, they saw a solution. They were going to use my face to unlock my phone. They were going to use my credentials to access the audit system. They were going to close the flag on my future father-in-law's file from the inside and bury the paper trail before the examination team arrived. If that failed, the photos were the backup. Blackmail. Enough to threaten my career and my federal clearance. Enough to make me choose between falsifying government records or watching everything I had built get destroyed. I sat at my desk until 2 in the morning building the file. I pulled every piece of evidence I could access through legitimate channels: public records on the family company, contractor filings, the original audit referral. I wrote up a detailed account of both incidents at the family home, including the urgent care visit and the toxicology results showing lorazepam. I added the full audio and video from the pen, timestamped and verified with transcript. I named the folder Cascade, because that's what this was, one thing stacked on top of another until the whole structure couldn't hold its own weight. Then I drafted an email to the special agent in charge of my field office and to the Department of Justice Tax Division attorney who handled our most significant referrals. I attached everything. I set a dead man's switch. The email would send automatically at exactly 9 p.m. on Saturday night if I didn't manually cancel it before then. Saturday night was the date of my future in-laws' annual charity gala. They hosted it every October at their home, a fundraiser for the Charlotte Urban Scholars Program, a nonprofit that funded college prep and scholarships for first-generation students from underserved communities. They'd been doing it for 15 years. It was their signature event. 300 guests on the list: city council members, bank executives, every major civic institution in Charlotte represented in one room. I had already been invited. I called my boyfriend on Thursday morning and told him, in a voice that trembled just enough, that I had thought about everything and I wanted to talk to his parents. I said I was scared and I didn't know what to do and I just wanted it to stop. I asked if we could meet before the gala on Saturday, just the 4 of us, so I could show them I was willing to cooperate. He paused for a long time on the other end of the line, then he said he would arrange it. On Saturday, I put on the dark green velvet dress I'd bought 6 months ago for a colleague's retirement dinner. I did my makeup carefully and put on the pearl drop earrings my grandmother gave me when I graduated from college. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I opened my jewelry box and took out the pen. I clipped it to the silk wrap I was wearing over the dress, angled precisely where I needed it. I arrived at their house at 5 p.m., 2 hours before the gala guests were due. The catering staff was already working. Long tables were being set up in the ballroom wing. A string quartet was doing a sound check near the fireplace. My future father-in-law met me at the door. He looked at me the way predators look at something that has just walked into range. He shook my hand and held it a beat too long. We sat in the study, both of his parents, my brother-in-law, my future sister-in-law, and my boyfriend, and me. My future mother-in-law slid a single sheet of paper across the coffee table. A letter addressed to my field office supervisor, describing in careful clinical language that I had entered an inappropriate relationship with an audit subject and leaked confidential investigation details in exchange for payments. None of it was true, but it was detailed, and in my line of work, an allegation like that, even a false one, even one that got investigated and cleared, could cost me my clearance, likely my position, certainly years of my life. "You're going to log into the examination system," my future father-in-law said, his voice gentle in the way that powerful men's voices get when they don't think they need to raise them. "You're going to access the audit file flagged under our company. You're going to close the referral and mark it unsubstantiated." And then this letter disappears and we all move forward. I looked at him, then at her, then at my boyfriend who was looking at the floor. I let my lip tremble, I let my eyes fill up. "Okay," I whispered, "but I need to do this in front of your guests, not in here." My brother-in-law frowned. "What?" "I know how this works." My voice cracked in exactly the right place. "If I do this in a back room, you'll never trust me. You'll always have leverage over me. You'll never stop threatening me." I looked at my future mother-in-law. "I need everyone to see that I'm with you. Voluntarily. So there's no question about it later." She studied me for a long moment. I watched her see exactly what she wanted to see, a terrified woman begging to be let into the circle. She looked at her husband, he nodded slowly. "Fine," she said. "You'll speak during the program, we'll introduce you as part of the family. You'll make your remarks, and then you'll handle the technical matter in the study while the dinner continues." "Thank you," I whispered. I reached out and touched her hand. She did not pull away. At 7:15, with 300 of Charlotte's most prominent citizens filling every room of the house, my future father-in-law stepped up to the microphone. He talked about legacy, he talked about community, he talked about the scholarships they'd funded, the students whose lives had changed. He talked about family. Then he gestured to me. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at the room, the city councilwoman I recognized from the news, the president of the Urban Scholars Board, the pastor of the largest AME church in the city, bank executives, community leaders, all of them here, in their formal clothes, celebrating a family whose foundation was hollow underneath. I set my laptop on the table beside the podium and connected it to the AV system. "Thank you," I said. My voice was completely calm. "I do want to share something tonight, something I think everyone in this room deserves to know." I pressed enter. The slideshow that appeared on the projector was not the anniversary photo tribute my future mother-in-law had prepared. It was the audio waveform from the pen recording with a scrolling transcript alongside it, and then I pressed play. Her voice filled the ballroom. "We don't have much time, get her phone first." The room went very still. I let the clip run for 45 seconds, long enough for everyone to hear my brother-in-law directing the photo staging, long enough to hear my future father-in-law's voice confirming the plan to access the federal database. Then I stopped it. "My name is not just his girlfriend," I said into the microphone. "I am a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. And for the past several weeks, this family has been drugging me at their dinner table and attempting to use my unconscious face to unlock federal systems. Tonight they ask me to falsify government records to close an active tax fraud examination, an examination covering approximately $5 million in unreported income over the past 11 years. No one moved. I want the board of the Urban Scholars Program to know that the donations from this family's company are under review as potential fraud proceeds. The scholarship recipients will not be affected. I made sure of that before I walked in here tonight." The board president, a woman in her 60s near the fireplace, stepped forward with her hand pressed to her chest. My brother-in-law moved first. He pushed through the crowd toward the side exit, his shoulder knocking a tray out of a waiter's hands. He made it about 12 feet before two men in dark suits, who had been standing near the back wall, stepped to intercept him. They had not been on the caterer's staff list. I had coordinated their presence with my field office 3 days earlier. "Federal agents," one of them said, "don't move." Within minutes, the sound of additional vehicles pulling into the driveway filtered through the tall windows. The lights reflecting off the glass were not from the catering trucks. My future father-in-law sat down in the nearest chair. He did not try to run, he just sat down and seemed to get smaller. My future mother-in-law did not sit. She stood very straight and stared at me from across the room. Not fury, not fear, something closer to watching everything you built over a lifetime dissolve in real time. Her charity committee friends were stepping away from her. The pastor had already turned his back. My future sister-in-law was crying, though whether from guilt or from the sudden understanding that she would be charged too, I couldn't say. The photos on her phone had been subpoenaed within 24 hours of me filing the initial referral. Her role in staging them was documented on the same recording, now echoing off the walls of the house she'd grown up in. My boyfriend had not spoken once. I stepped down from the podium and walked across the room until I was standing a few feet in front of him. He was looking at the floor again. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I looked at him for a moment, then I walked past him and out the front door. The legal process that followed was thorough and not particularly dramatic to summarize. The examination of his family's company confirmed $5.4 million in underpayments across 11 tax years. The Department of Justice filed federal charges, 14 counts of tax evasion and filing false returns. My brother-in-law faced conspiracy and obstruction charges, along with counts related to the attempted unauthorized computer access. My future sister-in-law was charged as a co-conspirator. The photos were on her phone, and her voice was on the recording giving directions that night in the living room. My future mother-in-law was charged separately, under a criminal referral I filed personally for the drugging. The toxicology report from urgent care was the cornerstone of that case. I had obtained it the morning after the second incident. That charge alone carries up to 10 years. My boyfriend was not charged. I testified honestly about what I had observed. He had driven me home on both occasions. He had not been present during the events in the living room, and the recording did not implicate him in the planning. What he knew and when he knew it, I cannot say under oath. I have my own conclusions, I keep them to myself. The Urban Scholars Program received emergency bridge funding from 2 private foundations within 3 weeks of the gala. Every scholarship for that academic year was honored. I had made that a condition of my cooperation with the timing, and the special agent in charge had agreed. I received a commendation from my field office 6 months after the case closed. I framed it and put it on the wall above my desk, next to a photograph of my grandmother at my college graduation. People ask me sometimes what the hardest part was. They expect me to say it was discovering that the man I was building a future with had let his family drug me and violate my body and threaten everything I had worked for. And that was hard. It is still hard. I won't pretend otherwise. But the hardest part was those 4 minutes on that sofa, feeling my brother-in-law's hand on my hip, and my future mother-in-law's voice giving directions, and choosing to stay still, choosing to breathe slowly, choosing to trust that the evidence accumulating on my lapel was the only version of justice that would actually last. That discipline came from years of building cases correctly. It came from every time a defense attorney looked at my documentation and couldn't find a single crack. It came from learning, over and over, that the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them keep doing it until you're ready. They thought because I smiled politely at dinner and passed the sweet tea without complaint and had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment across town that I didn't know what they were. But I had spent 6 years learning exactly how people like that operate. I had traced money through shell companies and offshore accounts for cases most people will never read about in the news. I knew what they were before I could prove it. I waited until I could prove it. If you're watching from a place where someone is using your love for them as a reason to stay quiet, I understand that feeling better than I can explain in words. But here is what I know now. Silence and stillness are not the same thing. I was very, very still, and I was recording every second.